Dear learners, we shall be continuing our discussion with our discussion on distinguishing sale from certain related concepts. So, there are certain other concepts in which there is transfer of goods, but legally speaking, they are not the same as sale. So, the purpose of this topic is by differentiating sale from various other similar concepts which are not legally sale, your concept of sale is going to become more clear while comparing it with some related concepts. So we'll be discussing it in two parts, part 1 and part 2 lecture. So let us first take up the comparison or difference between a sale and an agreement to sell. So they appear to be similar, however, they are distinguished on certain fundamental parameters. So, first, going into their meaning as per the Sale of Goods Act, Section 4, Subclause 3 of the Sale of Goods Act provides that sale is a concept under which the property in the goods is transferred from the seller to the buyer. That contract is called as a sale. So here the key word is the word transferred, meaning thereby it has already been done or it has already been completed or concluded. So where the parties have performed their part of the obligations, we call it as a sale. An agreement to sell, on the other hand, is where the transfer of the property in the goods is to take place at a future time or subject to some condition thereafter to be fulfilled. So the word thereafter is to be read in contrast with the word transferred. The contract is called an agreement to sell. So the key words I have highlighted here for your benefit. So in agreement to sell, as you can make out, the parties have not yet performed their part of the promise. So it is to be done at a future time or subject to some conditions which are to be fulfilled thereafter. So here lies the basic distinction between the two concepts. Now let us try to further crystallize them. So on the left hand side you have a feature on which there is a distinction. In the middle you have a sale, on the right hand side you have an agreement to sell. So first is on the transfer of ownership. So in sale, the ownership has already been transferred to the buyer from the seller, whereas in agreement to sell, the ownership on the goods is yet to be transferred to the buyer. As the definition points out, it is to be transferred at a future date or subject to some condition. The second is on the nature of the goods. In sale, because it is like a completed transaction, so the goods are already in existence. That is why a sale has happened. So the goods are existing goods, whereas an agreement to sell may be with regard to existing goods if it is dependent upon a particular condition to be fulfilled, or the goods can be future goods which are yet to be produced or manufactured by the seller. So in terms of the kinds of contract, sale is an executed contract, meaning thereby both the parties have performed their part of the promise, whereas agreement to sell is an executory contract, which means it is still in the process of completion or it is in a transitory phase. The passing of the risk in a sale, because the ownership has already transferred, the risk also passes to the buyer. So if any loss, damage is caused to the goods, the risk of such loss or damage has to be borne by the buyer. The risk in case of an agreement to sell remains with the seller, because mostly the goods are in the custody or under the autonomy of the seller. So if any loss or damage is caused to the goods while the seller is in possession, or the goods are in the process of being made, the cost has to be borne by the seller. Now the nature of the rights are different in two concepts. So sale is just in rem. So just in rem means there is a right against the entire world with regard to the peaceful possession as well as enjoyment of the property. So in rem means against everybody. Whereas in case of an agreement to sell, the rights which a buyer have, they can only be enforced against the seller. That is a kind of a personal right which is there for the buyer against the seller, whereas in case of a sale it is an absolute right against everyone. Now moving on to the next concept, that is exchange and barter. So we will first undertake a discussion on what is meant by exchange or a barter, and then we shall differentiate it with a sale. So a barter, as we usually understand, it is a very common expression. There is an exchange of goods for goods. There is not the agency of a third variable like that of a money. So usually the transactions which we do for selling of goods or buying of goods is that we make the payment and we get the goods. But barter is different. We give the goods and in exchange we get some other goods. As you can see the various instances on this picture. So in case of a sale, there is a transfer of goods for consideration which is in terms of price and has to be for money. So the goods are exchanged and in exchange the buyer gets the goods and seller gets the price which has to be in terms of money. This is what is the definition of a sale. Now we'll take up some exercises and then you have to decide as to whether it is a barter or a sale. So in this there are two persons X and Y who have entered into a contract where X transferred the ownership in a laptop to Y and in return he received a payment and rupees 4,000. So now you have to decide whether this is a sale or an exchange. So as you can see that this is a contract regarding the transfer of a laptop. So this is the main goods and what he has received is a pen and rupees 4,000. So pen here is goods and 4,000 here is money. So the consideration is partly goods and partly money. So in a sale, the consideration has to be valued in terms of money. But here, because the entire consideration is not in terms of money or cash, so therefore this is simply an exchange or a barter and it is not a sale. Now you have to distinguish this example with this example. So in this case, in an exchange program, a shop valued A's phone at rupees 3,000. A selected a new phone from the same shop priced at rupees 6,000. In the end, A gave the shop owner rupees 3,000 and sold and his old phone and got a new phone. So now let us try to deconstruct this transaction. So A is already in possession of an old phone which is valued at 3,000. Now he wants to buy a new phone which is valued at 6,000. Now, what are the terms and conditions of exchange? So A gave the shop rupees 3,000 and his old phone, and in return he got a new phone. So here consideration is 3,000 in cash, and he's given a phone which is valued also at 3,000. Now, what is the difference between this example and the previous example? Now, the difference is that in the previous example, there was no evidence that the valuation of the goods that was exchanged for the other goods along with money, there was any valuation of that goods in terms of money. But here, there is an evidence that the old phone is valued in terms of money. So although it is a goods that is partly exchanged, but that good has been valued in terms of money. So this phone's valuation is in terms of money. So therefore, this will be regarded as a sale and not an exchange, because the valuation of the part of the goods which form the subject matter of exchange, the valuation has been done in terms of money. And in the previous example, let us go back, there is no evidence that there is any valuation of this pen. So valuation is absent. So if the transaction is part money and part goods, but there is no valuation of the part goods in terms of money, it would be an exchange or a barter. But if the valuation of part of the goods is in terms of money, it would be regarded as a sale. So this example is very similar to a very well decided case of Aldridge versus Johnson. So in this case, 32 bullocks, which were valued at 192 Great Britain pounds, along with 23 Great Britain pounds in cash, and in exchange what was received was 100 quarter of barley, which was valued at 215 Great Britain pounds. So what we see here, the valuation of 32 bullocks and cash, this is total, it amounts to 215, and this valuation is equivalent to 100 quarter of barley. So because there has been a valuation of 32 bullocks in terms of money with money, that is 23 Great Britain pounds, so this would be regarded as a sale and not a barter, because there has been a valuation of the part of the goods in terms of money. So this is how you differentiate between a sale and a barter. So barter, goods for goods, and goods plus some cash, where the valuation of the goods is not in terms of money, but if it is in terms of money, it would be regarded as a sale. Now coming on next to differentiation between sale and contract for work and labor. So contract of work and labor can be simply understood with the help of an example. So if you go to a lawyer and you ask the lawyer to draft a contract for you, like an agreement of sale or a loan agreement, and he gives you a hard copy of the contract, and let's say that he charges you rupees 5,000, and the contract is in 10 pages. So obviously the cost of 10 pages is not 50,000. Now there is some additional variable for which the costing of that 10 pages amounts to 5,000 rupees. So when you get a contract from a lawyer, the pricing is not of the plain papers that you are getting, but the pricing is of the skill and labor, professional expertise, intellectual property that the lawyer has applied in order to make the contract. So therefore a contract with the lawyer if he gives you some services in exchange, it is for his work, labor and intellectual property. Now we have a case of Robinson versus Graves, that case related to a painting. Now the question in this case was that when a painting is sold from a seller to the buyer, whether it is a contract of sale or it is a contract of work and labor. If it is a contract of sale, then it would be subject to the taxation on goods and like sales tax. Now we have the GST, for example, which is a common. Now the question is that when a painter makes a painting, so the valuation is for the canvas on which he makes the painting, or it is for the art and skill which he actually applies to the canvas. So although the price of the canvas can be built into a contract of work and labor, but the actual pricing of the contract depends upon the valuation of skill, labor, art that the painter has applied into the painting. So this again is a contract of work and labor and not a contract of sale. So we have this another example. If let's say that there is a raw wood, you hire a contractor, enter into a contract, and the contractor, let's say, gives you a finished product, that is an almirah. So whatever the raw wood that the contractor buys, obviously you pay for it. But apart from that, the total valuation of the finished product, whether it is a contract of sale or it is a contract of work and labor. So if you have hired a contract, given him a raw wood and he gives you a finished article such as this, it will again be deemed to be a contract of work and labor and not a contract of sale. Some other illustrations that we have of contract of work and labor is, let's say, supply of a denture by the dentist. So it is not the cost of the material as such, but what also goes in is the input of his work and labor and professional services as a dentist. Similarly, prescription and supply of medicine by a doctor. So prescription may be on a simple piece of a paper, but the doctor may charge you, let's say, rupees 500 as his fee. So that prescription and supply of medicine is not like a sale of goods, it is like a contract of work and labor. Similarly, development of photography and supply of prints by a photographer, because this is a specialized art and a skill. So therefore, it will again be deemed to be a contract of work and labor. The relevant cases I have mentioned here. For supply of denture by a dentist, it is Lee versus Griffin. For prescription, Dodd